So this week I had a lot of development, from a big jump really from investigation towards experiments, and then from experiments back to investigation. Developed ideas were backed up from my experiments and investigation. I was actually able to start realizing my project a huge amount this week. Um, so I looked at my the way I was going to connect the corners basically. My first off idea was a biscuit joint right in the corners there, and then for my design I didn't want any end grain shown, so I angled these and still that was going to be a biscuit joint. But when I developed my design with these rounded edges in the corner pieces, I decided to tongue and groove them, removing the idea of the biscuit joint there. So that was a nice strong joint straight through, keeping it all square and tight. And discussing with Richie in the lab, we kind of decided on a loose tongue or loose groove joint, where I'd cut two grooves either side and add an actual piece of material as the tongue in between. So that was my initial plan. But when it came to this week with the time, and we've run out of time basically, I had to scrap this because the setup and the time it took to glue and set up, cut everything was going to be way too long. So I looked at other joints, finger joints, strong but just slow as well. Cutting out all those just wasn't going to work. And then the butt joint is fast, but it lacks that strength that I was looking for. So I decided on a dowel joint. So yeah, nice and strong and relatively quick as well to set up. So I was saving a lot of time there processing that. So just set up the jig, several steps, drill it and glue it, dowel it. So it's very quick and efficient. I then looked at the way I was going to attach and keep it closed and locked. So my initial thought was, in my sketches as shown, is a like a drawer lock, so nice and shallow. I could embed it into the top or the bottom. That was fine for a lid or a door, but when I decided to change my design to sort of a case and an inset, this wasn't going to work. So all the weight would be out here in the front, and the back would be falling away and pulling apart. So too much pressure would have been on that, and it just would have fallen apart. So I looked into other methods. So the clip and pull, the string pin, the latch and lock there. These are all, they could work, but just probably not the best. So I actually found the toggle clips. These are like on lunch boxes and those kind of ideas. The edge here is nice and narrow. That would fit on the base here, where the toggle itself would be on the casing. So one either side would keep that well secured together. And so that's what I've decided on doing. I'm going to experiment by two different sets roughly similar to these and see which one is best suited to my project. I then went and experimented some more on actual drawing, sketching, drafting out sizes which would be most efficient to fit around the casing. So I did a SolidWorks model, found some issues, I rectified them, and then I created the inset here, slots for the cigarettes to be put in, a grid to put out the ash, and a space to put out the ash there as well. Did find that the spacing was a bit off, so I had to adjust that a bit, make sure everything was a bit tighter so nothing fell down in front and would actually burn the wood. So I'd have to create maybe a little slant runoff, so make sure it fell center in the firelighter box there. My initial plan was to cut panels off sections off the panels and glue them together to create a 40 by 40 corner pieces. But with the time frame we had, waiting for the glue to dry was just not going to work. So luckily I had this extra piece of driftwood. So I started processing that. I did find that when I tried to get the 40 by 40 piece out of it, the crack that was split down the middle was right on the 42 mil area there, and it wasn't straight. So this went straight through, and that was a big problem for me. So I had to make a decision. I decided to make it 30 mil by 30 mil on the corners here instead of 40 by 40. This meant I had to add 10 mil either side onto my front and back panels. I had left enough space on the side panels that just fit, so I was lucky there, but I had to recut those. Luckily enough I had extra material there, so I was, I guess, just lucky in that case. But when I started processing that, I was nicely surprised to find lovely heartwood in the middle of this piece of driftwood, nice pine heartwood. And it actually, as I process it down into these 30 by 30 and then there's a nice contrast between the red heartwood and the outer paler pine there. So it's a nice feature, I think. The difference between the driftwood and then, as shown here, the difference between the driftwood there and the actual nice heartwood pine there on the corners, I think is a nice feature. Just by chance, actually, really adding to the project. Um, so when I was processing this panel here, the panel was 30 by 30. My initial plan was to take 60 mil out of the middle there and then glue it back together, reducing the panel and keeping these two grey, I suppose, holy bits there. But with the time frame again, I can't wait for the glue to dry. So made a decision to take off the bottom bit as shown here, reduce that down, but keep the better looking one there on top. So that was a decision I had to make. Just again, glue time, just ran out of time, I guess. In my haste, I completely forgot to take any photos of the doweled corners here. So they're currently missing, and when I get home now, I'll actually take photos and add them to next week's. But all I've left to do with this, and I've the base as well and the lid cut out, or the top cut out. So it's basically just what I have left to do with this for full completion is just sand it down and glue the dowels together when I get home, which is very easy to do. I feel like there's nothing that I can go wrong there. So it's basically just a bit of sanding, spruce it up, maybe some wax on the outside, and glue it together. So that is my stage so far.